This is Frederick Meekins of the Issachar Apologetics Research Institute. In a homily posted at sermonaudio.com, Pastor Sean Harris remarked that he did not understand how there could be a percentage of believers in his Baptist church that were not in a hurry to be baptized. Upon hearing that, if in the South, as his church is, one ought to go find an independent-type Methodist church and instead get baptized via pouring or sprinkling. If Republican elites such as the Bushes and the Romneys are remaining aloof from the convention over differences of policy and procedure regarding a particular likely nominee, why are the rest of us obligated to lavish the party machinery with our time and treasure when the moneyed secret societies instead have their way in the selection of a candidate? The cover story of an issue of New York Magazine warns, never has democracy been so ripe for tyranny. Interesting how the establishmentarian media failed to raise this valid warning when they were celebrating the erection of Greek temple facades and the suggestion that all of history should be reckoned in relation to Obama for him accomplishing little more than popping out of his mother's birth canal half black. On an episode of Generations Radio, Kevin Swanson insinuated that mothers working outside of the home are to blame for increases in autism because the Amish seldom suffer from this affliction. Swanson went on to insist that the way contemporary Americans live their lives results in the genetic changes bringing about this condition. Perhaps on an additional episode, the homeschool activist could elaborate upon the genetic diseases that do plague the Amish as a result of the indirect inbreeding that takes place as a result of a stretched and shallow gene pool. Yahoo featured a link to a Huffington Post article titled, "5 Reasons I Hate Religious Christianity." Will this be one of a series of articles to include similar titles such as 5 Reasons to Hate Observant Judaism, 5 Reasons to Hate Devout Islam, and 5 Reasons to Hate Practicing Homosexuals? Russell Moore accused Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton of representing the moral sewage of reality TV. Does he intend to enunciate similar condemnation of C.J. Mahaney for allegedly covering up child abuse and for pastoring churches that attempted to micromanage the lives of the congregants? A Yahoo headline lamented, "Fear of Trump drives immigrants to become citizens." In other words, migrants should continue to reside here without declaring loyalty if we are to view an impetus for such people to become citizens as negative. Hillary Clinton insists gun violence often occurs in areas damaged by pervasive racism. In other words, it's Whitey's fault when Tyrone guns down Shalon Quisha. Not drafting women is not about protecting women. Their lives are no more valuable than men's. It's actually about protecting the lives of men that would end up having to pick up the slack in combat situations. Even if exempted from combat situations, is there some reason women can't be compelled to render some form of involuntary servitude? They certainly don't mind leaving the confines of the home to labor elsewhere these days, and do not make breeding for the glory of the state their foremost priority. During the Obama regime, businesses and schools have been forced to alter their patterns of operation to placate the purveyors of perversion. How much longer until this tyrant or his successor attempts to dictate the doctrine taught inside the church in America, as transpires especially in European countries. On Fox News' The Five, Eric Bolling pondered, in light of the transgender bathroom brouhaha, if a man considered himself to be a woman, would he also qualify for government assistance or grant programs for women to established businesses? Nearly as much as an outrage as men urinating in front of little girls ought to be government funds going to assist anyone for a reason not really based upon actual accomplishment, but solely as a result of inherent biology. For did not the Obama regime justify this endeavor to upend this aspect of the American social order on the grounds of needing to end discrimination wherever it may be found? What a hypocrite! The town newspaper published an article about a local Baptist pastor that did his doctoral research how the community has become more diverse and less white. Even prior to the publication of this municipal propaganda, he resigned his position from this particular church to pursue a ministry opportunity in Canada, probably the whitest country in North America. Senator John Thune has issued a letter demanding that Facebook respond to allegations that the social network's administrators suppress trending conservative news. As disturbing and outrageous as that happens to be, doesn't it pale in comparison to an official of the U.S. government making threats against a private organization? For what is to prevent similar arm twisting against conservatives or the religiously motivated that also present information to favor their own particular worldview or agenda? The rumored antagonist of the proposed Justice League film is Steppenwolf, one of Darkseid's generals. Isn't this character a little obscure to catch the attention of the general viewing public? Even I barely care. Darkseid had better be featured for the purposes He had better be featured for the purposes of readying for Darkseid's arrival, or this film is going to flop. In a graduation oration, President Obama contemptuously mocked what he categorized as an endless wall to keep immigrants out. Well, he has enthusiastically opposed the proposed increase in the height of the fence surrounding the White House. In an age where it is apparently acceptable for a grown man to whip out his wiener in the presence of a little girl in the ladies' room, unless Donald Trump raped them, why are we to get all jacked out of shape if he has enjoyed a few women in his day? They probably liked the attention at the time. If a woman does not like men fawning all over her and, well, asking her to model certain outfits, perhaps she should prefer another line of work. Didn't liberals set the precedent with Bill Clinton that this kind of hanky-panky was off limits in terms of criticism and scrutiny? If women are going to have meltdowns over this, why should we think they will be able to endure the horrors of frontline combat? The African American Museum in Washington, D.C. frankly looks like the Jawa sandcrawler in Star Wars. Responding to protests on the part of Sanders supporters following the theft of the Nevada caucus, Democratic Chairman Debbie Wasserman Schultz demanded civility on the part of the offended and outraged. Would she have called for such if instead the agitated consisted of Black Lives Matter mobs looting businesses and burning private property to the ground? A pastor lamented that in his neighborhood visitation, a number did not open the door when it was knocked upon, but later noticed that the material he had left behind was taken inside. Firstly, the occupant is under no obligation to open the door. Secondly, is this pastor as receptive to operatives of the watchtower that come knocking on his door? It was remarked in a sermon that often the ones smiling in a crowd are Christian. And what scripture backs this up? Maybe some people just aren't the type to smile with little provocation. To paraphrase C.S. Lewis, if you don't think a particular believer's expression is sufficiently joyous or Christian, just think how much sadder they'd look if they didn't know Jesus. In a sermon, Joel Osteen insisted that God does not want prayers about our illnesses. He prefers prayers about our dreams in terms of our most intense desires and aspirations. But if your sickness is of a sufficient duration or intensity, aren't most of your dreams focused upon your health being restored? A Washingtonian area TV station is to broadcast an expose on bartenders selling booze to pregnant women. Firstly, is it against the law to sell this legal product to women over the minimum drinking age in such a reproductive state? Secondly, is it not her body to do with as she pleases? If not, why does a principle apply in an abortion clinic rather than a bar? For the unborn child has more of a likelihood of surviving the experience at the bar rather than the abortion clinic. Shrieking banshees known as feminists are now on a rampage about the pink alternative of certain products costing more than the version marketed towards men. Do these equality activists also intend to advocate for the reduction of male auto insurance rates or the abolition of government handouts intended to advantage female enterprises and businesses? It was warned on Generations Radio that our weekday idols take away from Sunday worship. But what about the danger of elevating the Sunday experience to a place where it is assumed that God can only be worshipped through the trappings and mechanics of formalized religious gatherings? WRC4 broadcast a story about an Air Force wife in need of a new kidney. Does the station broadcast profiles of every other patient in need of a transplant, as well as the occupations of the accompanying spouses? The anchors remarked, "What a wonderful opportunity to contribute to someone in such profound need." As such, do these propagandists plan to offer their own organs for extraction and reassignment to someone they don't even know or even really care about? It has been argued that individuals should be allowed to utilize any public restroom of their choosing in order to relieve themselves or to engage in whatever form of public exhibitionism arouses them sexually. In an age where it is questioned if even the remaining minimalist standard should still be imposed, who is to say that the truly liberated individual should be required to confine themselves to a room before commencing the natural process of elimination? Think this sounds outrageous? Just wait another half-century or so, for did not Diogenes pull this sort of stunt? And to this very day, he is celebrated in many an introduction to philosophy or Western civilization course as the epitome of a truly authentic individual. On WMAL, it was remarked that selecting Martin O'Malley to run the Democratic National Committee would be a step backwards in terms of diversity. In other words, the former Maryland governor is too white, possesses a penis, and that particular appendage is aroused most likely by women rather than other men. Groveling on the world stage regarding the bombings of Hiroshima, President Obama admonished that the world needs to move beyond the fear that makes nuclear weapons necessary and instead embrace a posture of disarmament. But would he be so courageous if not guaranteed a place in the civil defense facilities designed to protect the planetary elites during an atomic crisis? This has got to be the most mindless thing I've ever heard from a pulpit. It was suggested that one ought to drive around a neighborhood, not so much handing out flyers regarding Vacation Bible School, but offering to drive the children there. Try explaining this when the police are called about some weirdo asking kids to get in their car. If these are primarily immigrant children, if the parents can find their way deep into the United States, far from any border, I am sure they can find their way to a church in the neighborhood on their own. In an analysis of Captain America's Civil War, homeschool activist Kevin Swanson condemned superheroes for saving people from threats this podcaster categorizes as superficial. But a movie is not a systematic theology. Taking this reasoning to its logical conclusion, should firefighters be condemned for pulling people from burning buildings instead of preaching from the periphery about the eternality of hellfire? During a PBS town hall, President Obama lamented the demise of civility in relation to the discussion of public issues. Does this condemnation extend to minorities looting wig shops and liquor stores repeatedly in response to unpopular court verdicts? One child sneaks into a guerrilla compound likely as a result of inattentive parents. As in the case of the SeaWorld orcas, before it's over with, there will be no zoos. Elites will continue to berate us as to why we should surrender still more freedoms, but we will not be allowed to see these creatures. PETA is not so much pro-animal as it is anti-human. Just ask the numerous animals that the organization has allowed to perish or actively brought about the deaths of, rather than to be enjoyed in various capacities by humans. In a stage play depicting the characters from Harry Potter as adults, Hermione Granger has been recast as a black woman. Tolerance mongers will likely snap that one isn't supposed to look at color. Then why is it that the girl that plays Hermione and Ron Weasley's daughter just happens to split the difference between the two in terms of flesh tone? Why not a pale Swede or a freckled Irish girl with flaming hair? Most of the Weasley clan were gingers after all. This is Frederick Meekins.